I don't think I'm a member of this particular channel, but Jim Grumpy posted hashtag my 30-day world. And somebody come back and told me it was part of such and such channel, which is fine. Kind of thing I'd like to see the Brigade channel do, but I've noticed, now this is just opinion, that the Brigade channel has turned into basically an advertisement channel for the most part. You don't see as much open discussion on topics of our hobby on the channel as much as I did a year ago. So, I don't know. And that's just my opinion on it. The reason I looked at this and become interested in it because it's focused on explaining and describing your campaign world or a campaign world. And because of some of the questions that I read, I thought, gee, this is something that would be, pertinent and interesting for me to do. And I will post the lion's share of them on my YouTube website and not bother y'all with it because, I'm not trying to turn the video response channel into a advertisement channel. But if you're interested, you're interested. That's, of course, up to the individual, I guess. And then I thought, what do they mean by a campaign world? What does that bring to mind? And while there are a lot of game worlds, pre-generated and homegrown, that qualify as the campaign world, or the setting that the campaign takes place in. And some of them are quite extensive and quite in-depth, and some of them are very shallow and very mercurial when it comes to depth, which is fine because, as we've discussed in the past, and I'm sure the topics come up many times, that one of the few things we don't need to do is overdo the backstory for anything. Somebody posted a comment or a comic, cartoonish thing here the other day about, these people standing around a table, and one of them says, if your backstory is more than 100 words long, blah. So, there you go. Hashtag or day number 1, and I'm just going to go by the numbers because obviously I'm now a couple days behind, and I'm going to try like I did when we did the 31-day challenge for August for the RPG Network last year, or RPG Brigade last year, 4 or 5 at a time as my time allows. And there you go. So, who dominates the political sphere of your world? Well, for starters, I need to clarify. My campaign setting of choice is for my sci-fi game system, Stellar Frontiers, patent pending. The world or universe, if you will, is called Settled Space. It is roughly set 8,000 years in the future in humanity's future. And my premise was, what would mankind be like 6,000 years from now, 8,000 years from now, based off of the past 6,000 to 8,000 years of human history? Not the shiny, fluffy, communistic society bent would-be beautiful world known as Star Trek, but the real gritty, reality-based, factual evolution of where we've been, where we are, and where we'll end up. And to tie in with that, some key scientific breakthroughs occurred. Obviously, we found a way to go faster than speed of light. We discovered how to extend the human lifespan by 10 times. So it's not impossible for a human being to live to be 500 years to 800 years with modern healthcare, which is not to say that it's not possible to go even longer with all the cybernetic and bioorgan implant and transplant abilities that exist or would exist in the future. Technology number 3, the 4 cornerstone technologies, is biogenetics. The fact that humanity is just still irking its way through learning how to clone and grow human body parts and clone living animals such as cows and pigs and so on. Well, eventually that if our moral ethics don't get in the way, that we will go to the point where we can genetically engineer humans much, much more sophisticated than we are envisioning at the moment. So it's not impossible to custom create super soldiers and farmers who can and colonists who can live on marginally habitable worlds or in exotic environments like the water and thinner air or heavier gravity, so on and so forth. In addition to that, of course, is the typical behavior of humanity to take things to the next, perhaps ludicrous stage, such as customizing human beings to genetically resemble fantasy creatures, for example, elves and goblins and halflings and what have you, in order to populate Euro Disney planet-style entertainment complexes, and so on and so forth. Not to mention the personal choices that individuals can occur over their lifetime of deciding, I do like to have blue hair, I do want to have a third eye, etc., etc. So the fourth, of course, is the ability to not negate gravity per se, but overcome it. The ability to overcome gravity makes it extremely practical to heavy lift lots of people and lots of material out of a gravity well, off a planet and into space where it can be propelled around, or makes things more feasible in more exotic worlds, such as planets that do not have a solid, if you're living on a marshland world and you want to build a giant city that hovers on top of it, the technology is there. We have the means and ability to do so. Which answers nothing, none of which answers the question, who dominates the political sphere of my universe? Humanity does. But to be specific, the system is set up that each player starts out as a squire, settling a frontier world of their own with the intentions of building their own space kingdom or a house. This house, in turn, owes political fealty to any larger houses that can bring them under their wing. Perhaps they owe fealty to the creator house that helps sponsor them. If your house lord is the seventh daughter who decides she wants to have her own kingdom as opposed to being married off to support the family's political ambitions, and so on and so forth. Perhaps they still owe some fealty to that core house. Then there's the core of settled space, of the Imperium itself. The Imperium is what became of Earth's Terran Federation in various stages over the last 8 millennia. The history is quite depth and detailed, and humanity's been through its stages, and its current stage is the fourth great and mighty Imperial Terran blah blah blah, which everybody calls the Imperium. The Imperium is ruled by an emperor, not unlike Rome. And there's a lot of similarities to the political system and how things work on the highest levels. It mimics Rome to some degree without mimicking all the pomp and pageantry. The Imperium has its own version of pomp and pageantry. For the player and the player characters, the Imperium is this giant, distant, megalithic force that's always looming in the background as a potential threat. If a house lord deviates from certain understood law, the Imperium will step on them like a bug. That's the way it works. Some occasions an Imperial battle fleet might jump into your system, accidentally back up over your planet and destroy it by using it for target practice, and then later putting out a posting saying, oh, we had the wrong coordinates. We're terribly sorry about the, blah, blah, blah. And there's nothing left but smoking embers of what was a thriving colony. But that's not the norm. That is extremely rare. The Imperium itself is so huge and so far away that it's not practical. This was the fourth cornerstone of my world building process. How does a political body sustain itself over a vast distance? The theoretical jump time between your core startup world and the core sphere, your startup frontier world and the core sphere of the Imperium is roughly a year. A year at the fastest starlight travel capability. A year with many, many stops in between, because no ship is designed to make that entire leap self-sustained. The maximum is 30 light years per jump, I believe, and the maximum a really huge ship might have the capacity for is 100 jumps. So potentially they're going to make, 3,000 light years before needing to refuel and resupply. But that's extremely rare. The fact is, the Imperium is so far away that you're pretty much on your own. You make your own rules and your own laws as long as they make a nod towards the Imperium standard. Because that's the one thing the Imperium won't tolerate is competition. If an outlying force of worlds and houses or political entities rise up together to become a threat to the core of the imperial system, the Imperium are going to put a stop to it. And they're going to do it with a vengeance. Because they need to make an example. We are all in this boat together. That's how they look at it. But in reality, I base the political system in this world on the Middle Ages. And Middle Age Europe specifically. Where you have all these small nation states, small city states, small nations competing with each other. Within those competing nations are various levels of royalty who compete with each other for land, for politics, for the ear of the king, so on and so forth. And within those larger pseudo kingdoms, the Grand Duchy or the Duchy may have a dozen or half a dozen baronies, and within the baronies there might be 20 squiredoms and thanedoms, counties and city states that all owe some degree of fealty to the next rung of the ladder. So, the political sphere is quite complicated. Who dominates? The individual. The House Lord dominates his or her house, dominates her region until she no longer does. There is part of the danger of expanding, and the game system is designed to do that. The game system will have homeless, titleless nobles show up, some hat in hand and some with a small colony package, with the intentions of setting up in the nearby region, which is then controlled by your house. Your house then finds itself with a vassal state or a banner house, if you will, and they have to deal with that or eliminate it. Elimination has negatives, and they accumulate. If you're constantly stealing or capturing or impounding merchant traffic, you'll see less merchant traffic. The percentages will get to the point where you'll get almost no merchant traffic. If you're constantly trying to invade the neighbors, well, the neighbors will eventually counter this with their actions of their own, or on a very, very extreme role, the Imperium itself might come in. Now, the most commonly seen entity of the Terran Imperium is the Star Marshal Service. These are the most far-flung forces that you will encounter. The Imperium maintains naval bases and stuff within the quadrants, but usually they are far away from these startup houses, so you occasionally get a role where an Imperial starship will show up, or an Imperium Star Marshal will show up, Imperium the Health Bureau will show up, that kind of thing. But once again, they're not common, which is by design. So there you have it. You, the player, through your House Lord, dominates your sphere of the greater sphere. Always being aware that you are a little twig in a very big tree.